Welcome to Stamps Old World UK, the channel where we dive deep into the fascinating history, artistry, and value of the world's most iconic stamps. Today, we're talking about a true legend in philately, the 1-cent blue Benjamin Franklin stamp from the United States, and the broader question, how much are rare stamps like this worth in today's market, especially in US dollars? Let's start with this striking blue 1-cent stamp. First issued in the late 19th and early 20th century, this classic design features a profile portrait of Benjamin Franklin, one of the founding fathers of the United States and the first Postmaster General. It's a cornerstone of American philately, and collectors across the globe know it well. But not all Franklin stamps are created equal, and that's where things get really interesting. The value of this 1-cent stamp today can vary dramatically based on a few critical factors: condition, rarity, printing variation, perforation, watermarks, and cancellation marks. A common, well-circulated example may only be worth a few dollars, perhaps $5 to $15, if it has visible wear, tears, or heavy postmarks. But if you find it in mint condition, never hinged, with well-centered borders and deep color, that stamp can fetch anywhere from $200 to over $1,000 depending on the specific year and version. Now, let's talk about some high-end variations. One of the most valuable versions of this 1-cent Franklin stamp is the 1908 bluish paper issue, part of the Washington Franklin series. Only a few of these survive in pristine condition. If you have one of these and it's certified by an expert authority like the Philatelic Foundation or the American Philatelic Society, you could be sitting on a small fortune. These can sell for over $15,000 at auction, sometimes even more for the finest examples. Another particularly valuable type is the Scott No. 596, often referred to as the rotary press coil waste version. This stamp looks very similar to the common 1-cent Franklin, but was printed using a different method and is significantly rarer. Only a few dozen examples are known to exist today. If you were lucky enough to find one of these hidden in an old album or inherited collection, you could be looking at a value upwards of $100,000. Yes, 6 figures for a 1-cent stamp. It's not a fantasy, it's a reality in today's philatelic market. So what makes these rare stamps so valuable? It's all about scarcity and demand. The older and rarer our stamp is, especially if it was part of a short print run or has an error, the more collectors are willing to pay. And with more people turning to collectibles like stamps, coins, and vintage cards as alternative investments, prices have been climbing steadily over the last decade. Even in 2025, amid a fast-paced digital world, rare stamps remain tangible treasures that continue to gain value. Here's what you should look for if you're going through old stamp albums or buying from estate sales. First, always check for any unusual colors, misprints, or overprints. Second, inspect the perforations carefully. Some valuable varieties are distinguishable only by tiny differences in the number of perforations along each edge. Third, be mindful of cancellations. While used stamps can still be worth a lot, mint condition stamps with original gum are always in higher demand. You might be wondering, how do I know what my stamp is worth? The best first step is to get it examined by a stamp expert or appraiser. There are online resources like Mystic Stamp Company, Stanley Gibbons, and the Scott Catalog, where you can compare your stamp to authenticated examples. Even better, submit it to a recognized expertising service for a certificate of authenticity. This adds major credibility and can significantly boost your selling price if you ever decide to part with it. At Stamps Old World UK, we always encourage collectors, new and seasoned, to keep learning and looking, because you never know what might be hiding in a shoebox, an attic, or a dusty old envelope. Something as small as a 1-cent stamp could change your life. Some people have discovered forgotten rarities tucked away in family albums that sold for tens of thousands of dollars. And yes, many of those hidden gems are Franklin stamps. just like the one we're featuring today. So what's the takeaway? If you're holding a 1-cent Benjamin Franklin stamp, don't assume it's worthless. Even if it's a common version, its value may surprise you, especially if it's in good condition. And if it's a rare variant, you could be looking at a stamp worth more than gold, literally. The stamp market today is vibrant, passionate, and in many cases incredibly rewarding for those with knowledge and patience. That wraps up today's deep dive on the value of the 1-cent Franklin stamp in today's market. Whether you're a passionate collector or just getting started, always remember to preserve, protect, and study your stamps carefully. And who knows, maybe you're holding the next 5- or 6-figure rarity.
Next up, the 2-cent green George Washington. It's one of the most recognizable stamps in U.S. philately, and it's packed with history, mystery, and surprisingly, some serious value in today's market. If you've ever come across this striking green stamp in an old album, you might want to take a second look, because under the right conditions, it could be worth hundreds, thousands, or even tens of thousands of U.S. dollars. The 2-cent Washington stamp was issued in many variations over several decades, most famously between the late 1800s and early 1900s. Its bold green color and the noble profile of George Washington, the first president of the United States, make it one of the most iconic American stamps ever printed. But here's what most people don't know. Not all 2-cent Washingtons are created equal. While some may only be worth a few dollars, others have reached astronomical values at auction, driven by rare varieties, printing errors, and historical significance. Let's break it down. The common versions of this stamp, especially those printed in the early 1900s and widely distributed, usually hold a modest value, typically ranging from $2 to $10 US in used condition. However, mint condition examples, especially those with original gum and never hinged, can go for $30, $50, or more depending on centering and clarity. If the stamp is exceptionally well centered and has vivid color, collectors will pay a premium. But where things get really exciting is when you enter the world of rare subtypes. One such rare type is the 2-cent Washington from the 1908 to 1922 Washington Franklin series. Some of these stamps were printed on different types of paper, like the famous bluish paper, or come with rare perforation combinations, watermarks, or inverted centers. For example, the Scott No. 519, which is an incredibly rare rotary press version of the 2-cent Washington, has fetched prices between $5,000 and $20,000 US, depending on condition and certification. And even rarer is the Scott No. 482A, known as the imperforate error. With fewer than 50 known to exist, this stamp is a true treasure, and in fine condition, it can be valued at over $40,000 US. There are also fascinating variations within the 2-cent green stamp family that are harder to spot, but highly prized. Stamps printed with the wrong shade of green, double impressions, or faint printing shifts can all significantly increase value. Stamps with historical cancellations, for instance, first day of issue marks or early postmarks from now defunct post offices, can also be worth hundreds of dollars to specialized collectors. And here's something every stamp hunter should keep in mind. Condition matters a lot. A stamp with perfect perforations, no tears, strong color, and clean gum on the back is exponentially more valuable than one with creases, smudges, or missing corners. If you believe you have a valuable 2-cent Washington, it's absolutely worth getting it graded or appraised by a professional philatelic organization. This can dramatically increase the stamp's marketability and ensure that you get the true market value if you ever choose to sell. In today's world where collectibles have become digital and virtual, stamps remain one of the few tangible assets with lasting historical and financial value. The market for classic American stamps has remained surprisingly strong, especially for high-grade examples with rare characteristics. In 2025, collectors from around the globe, including investors, are paying more attention than ever to these miniature arts of art. Auction houses like Siegel, Heritage, and Spink are seeing record interest in U.S. stamps, especially those from the 19th and early 20th century. So, how do you know if your 2-cent green George Washington stamp is worth more than face value? The first step is identification. Use reliable references like the Scott Specialized Catalog or contact a trusted dealer. Next, compare it to known varieties, paying close attention to watermarks, gum, perforations, and color tone. Finally, consider expertising. Getting a stamp certified by the Philatelic Foundation, or PSE, could be your ticket to unlocking its full market value. In today's world where collectibles have become digital and virtual, stamps remain one of the few tangible assets with lasting historical and financial value.
Next up, the 3-cent George Washington stamp, famously printed in a rich purple or violet tone. With its detailed engraving and regal portrait of the first U.S. president, this stamp is one of the most collected and studied issues in American philately. But here's the million-dollar question. Is it worth anything in today's stamp market? And just how valuable can it really be? This particular 3-cent stamp, featuring George Washington, has been printed in many different versions across the early 20th century, particularly between the 1910s and 1930s. Some versions were produced as part of commemorative series, others as definitive issues used widely throughout the United States postal system. The striking violet color and ornate classical frame make it one of the most visually appealing stamps from that era. But while millions were printed, only a small percentage have survived in pristine condition, and even fewer are rare varieties that command serious prices in today's collector market. Let's begin with the standard value range. If you have a used 3-cent Washington stamp with cancellation marks, the typical value might be between $1 and $5 US. These are the most common types, often found in family collections and inherited albums, but don't be too quick to dismiss them. Even among used examples, stamps with unusual cancellations or postmarks from now-defunct post offices can hold collector value. And if your stamp is unused, has original gum, and is in mint condition, its value can rise significantly, up to 20, 50, or more, depending on centering and the issue year. Now here's where it gets exciting. There are several rare and valuable varieties of this 3-cent Washington stamp that collectors actively seek. For example, certain issues from the 1923 to 1926 Fourth Bureau issue series are more scarce than others due to subtle design changes and printing shifts. An example of this is the Scott No. 555, printed in a slightly darker purple and issued with a particular perforation pattern. A perfect mint example of Scott 555 can sell for over $150, and if it's graded or certified in superb condition, that number can increase to $300 or more. Even more valuable are printing errors and production rarities. There are known examples of the 3-cent Washington printed on the wrong type of paper, or with double impressions, misaligned images, or color variations. These errors are rare, but when found they can fetch hundreds or even thousands of dollars depending on rarity and condition. A known double transfer error, where part of the image was etched twice during printing, is one of the most sought-after varieties among error collectors, and examples have sold at auction for over $2,000. Another factor to consider is the type of perforation and the printing method. The same design may have been printed using flat plate, rotary press, or offset printing, and some of these types are far rarer than others. For example, stamps printed on rotary presses often have slightly larger designs due to the curvature of the press, and those distinctions can make all the difference in identifying a highly valuable subtype. That's why close examination using a magnifying glass or scanner is essential, and why many experienced collectors rely on the Scott Specialized Catalog or expertising services to confirm the true identity of their stamps. So what does this all mean for you, the collector? It means that even a common-looking 3-cent Washington stamp could be a hidden treasure. Don't underestimate the stamp just because it looks familiar or old. Condition is everything. Sharp corners, clean gum, and a well-centered image can mean the difference between a low-value piece and a highly collectible one. It's also important to consider certification. Having your stamp graded or authenticated by a professional service, such as the American Philatelic Society or the Philatelic Foundation, can greatly boost its credibility and market value. In 2025, the collectible stamp market remains active and dynamic. While the digital age continues to dominate communication, stamps have become even more cherished as historical artifacts, symbols of a bygone era when postage carried not just letters, but stories, heritage, and even artistry. Collectors across the US, UK, and beyond are still willing to pay premium prices for rare and high-grade examples, and auction prices continue to reflect this growing interest. The 3-cent George Washington stamp, with its rich visual detail and historical importance, remains a favorite among both new and seasoned philatelists. Here at Stamps Old World UK, we believe that every stamp holds more than monetary value. It holds a place in history. Whether you collect for profit, nostalgia, or pure passion, discovering the story behind each piece is what makes stamp collecting so rewarding. The 3-cent Washington stamp reminds us that even the most common objects can hold extraordinary worth if we take the time to learn about them, protect them, and appreciate their place in the wider philatelic world. Thank you for joining us today for this deep dive into the 3-cent George Washington stamp. If you enjoyed this exploration and want to see more insights into classic stamps, market trends, and rare finds, don't forget to subscribe to Stamps Old World UK, like the video, and click the bell to stay notified of our future releases. Whether you're a collector or a curious learner, your journey through stamp history has only just begun. Until next time, keep your albums close, your magnifying glass ready, and never stop searching, because the next rare treasure might just be sitting in your drawer waiting to be discovered.